Увімкнено.
Добрий день, з вами Ольга Таманова.
Good afternoon, my name is Olha Tamanova, and I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 691 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking about the situation in Kherson region. Joining us online is Oleksandr Tolokonnikov, the head of the press office of Kherson Military Administration. Mr. Oleksandr, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Mr. Oleksandr, we know that the occupiers don't stop shelling Kherson and Kherson region. What is the situation for the time being? We're hearing explosions. The Russians continue destroying the settlement of Stanislav for the third day in a row. They continue the shellings. For rescuers have become casualties yesterday as a loitering drone was targeting them. Fortunately, it did not hit the truck itself that transported them, but they have injuries. And also there is a hospital, a department of Ukrposhta. The aerial lines of different diameter were destroyed. Unfortunately, the settlement ended up without electric power supply. In general, the situation is very difficult. As soon as the shellings cease, the power technicians will proceed to mitigation of consequences. Also, there was a strike on Inhulets today. A man was injured and hospitalized to a hospital in Kherson. Also, we have reports from Berislav that the Russians dropped yet another munition on one of the streets of Berislav. We are double checking the information. We only know that there are casualties now, and we will report subsequently. Mr. Oleksandr, since the moment of the occupation, do we have an understanding of the number of casualties in Kherson and Kherson region? Well, for what I remember, it's approximately 200 people that were killed, maybe a little bit less. I can give you the exact figures a little bit later, and 220 more injured since the moment of the occupation. Recently, there was information in the media from a journalist who had visited Kherson, and there were lines in her report that in Kherson there are almost no apartment blocks which would be undamaged. So for our understanding of the scale of damage, is it real so? Well, talking about the region, 22,000 buildings were either damaged or partly destroyed in Kherson region. Talking about Kherson, well, 50% of the apartment blocks are damaged for sure. Horrible figures. And what is the condition of critical infrastructure? Does Kherson region and the city of Kherson have the normal heating, power and water supply? We've increased the number of consumers who got reconnected to the central heat supply. 91% is now with heat supply. The works are still underway on some sections where there were some damages or malfunctions. Yet another problematic district is Ostrov, the island, and over there the heat supply network goes above the ground. There are problems with the damage of heat supply, and there is also problem with the heat supply of apartment blocks, because in those apartments whose inhabitants left and we don't have supply to them, there are malfunctions of the network, specifically in some apartments from where the inhabitants left, and we cannot mitigate such consequences. And talking about the water supply, 99% of the population of Kherson is with normal water supply. And what about the humanitarian situation? Is the evacuation of denizens is still underway? Well, the evacuation is going on for more than a year. Whoever wishes just needs to call 0800 101 102 to sign up for evacuation, to mention the regions where you want to leave for. And talking about the food, the charity foundations, they provide meals for the vulnerable categories of population, like people with restricted mobility, people of age, disabled. We have all the lists which were provided to the headquarters of humanitarian or local headquarters of humanitarian organizations, both in Kherson and in communities. We were visiting Zelenivska community yesterday. People are quite satisfied with everything. There are families with kids, and international charitable organizations take care of them. What is really necessary is the construction materials for mitigation of consequences of enemy strikes. First of all, to cover the windows or roofs, to cover those roofs that were hit by the enemy. Mr. Oleksandr, and talking about the temporarily occupied territory of Kherson region, what do we know? What's going on there with our people? Is it like they are provided with all the basic necessities? What is the situation with critical infrastructure there? Well, we are here under constant shelling, and we try to provide people with the utility services to the maximum extent possible. And in some places like Skadovska, Honishchensk regions, the security situation is not as difficult as here over there, and people still are facing problems over there with water supply, with electricity supply. There are no repair teams fixing stuff. No one even wants to get any applications for repairs. And since the beginning of winter, they announced that they would issue the call to the people who acquired Russian passports, so people started coming to local occupational authorities, and they do not even know how to process those applications, let alone any understanding of how this call comes to those people. If it makes it to those people, it will happen probably by the end of the winter, in the best case scenario, when people don't need it. And yet another difficult issue is the medical aid. It's on the lowest level. Sometimes the ambulance may or may not come, but there are no medicines, there is no gas to gas those cars, there are no doctors, the hospitals are out of operation. Even if they do, they focus on treatment of the injured occupiers, which are real numerous there. The people are offered to go to Crimea for medical treatment in case they need any surgery. or just stay in a hospital for more than 1 day. Also, we have reports about the occupational authority collecting signatures in support of a candidate who supports Russian dictator, and the collaborationists are out on missions to have all those documents signed. Other people don't really want to walk that dangerous way because they see that the situation is not being equalized. Nobody needs them. There are just some solemnities. Pro-Russian holidays are being celebrated in the schools or in the central squares. So other than that, nothing is going on in the occupied territories. Also, we get reports about the key collaborationist of East Bank Kherson region, Saldo. He announced that before the 15th of April they're about to create the mobilization lists to mobilize the men born from 2007 and earlier. So they create the commissions, local subscription offices, and they want to start the mobilization by the 15th. So this is their plan. Thank you very much for this information, dear colleagues. Do we have any questions on the floor? Good afternoon, Valentina Rihel, Ukrinform. Mr. Oleksandr, can you please give a little bit more detail about the evacuation? Is there a mandatory evacuation of children planned in Kherson, and what is the number of children remaining in Kherson for the time being? Well, currently we have from 5,000 to 7,000 children in Kherson, for what I remember. Talking about the mandatory evacuation, there are no such plans so far. Oleksandr Perkulin told in his interview to Ukrinform, he said that we are ready for any developments, for any deterioration of security situation, and in case of necessity, we will promptly announce such necessity through all the channels of communication if such a need arises. Currently, we've evacuated people from 23,000 settlements, almost 700 children with families. Only in 5 out of 23 there are children remaining. It's quite a difficult work, specifically when the families don't understand the scale of the problem, when they don't understand that they should leave to ensure safety for their children, that it's a priority rather than watching after your hens or cattle. That they say, like, you know, it's not so loud now, and anyway, it's difficult to work with such parents now. Still, the juvenile police and social protection organizations, they continue to work with those people to make sure they leave. They offer different options, different directions where people can live for. There are where housing is provided for them, and they can live in a more secure situation. So children who continue living in Kherson and Kherson region, do they study online? Yes, they continue studying online, not only for the children of the West Bank, but also of the East Bank of Kherson region, as well as those who left abroad. Thank you very much for all this information. Let me remind you, joining us was Oleksandr Tolokonnikov, the head of the press office of Kherson military administration, and in 15 minutes we will have another briefing. We will continue talking about Kherson region. Joining us will be Natalia Humanyuk, the head of the United Coordinating Press Center of the Security and Defense Forces of the South of Ukraine. Stay tuned. Let's continue working together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine.